think it included Rio too.
I think it went to the back half and stopped.
Could be.
Yeah, the bigger section of the homes is outside of.
Well, it seems like we're trying to go in and fix this and that and tweak that, but I think what we need to do is go to the foundation of what is that area, the long-term goal of the,
And Mayor and Council, this conversation is for us to kind of come back and address 54
Right.
concerns. As we do the development, when we do the comprehensive plan, these are gonna be discussions that you're gonna high level get
With the
into
public.
initially. We'll engage with the public at that point in time and have those conversations. And then you'll also be bringing back that policy direction so that we can start amending this. This is making it clean for you, but it's at least giving you a head start, so.
And I think what we can look at now is the parking requirements, which there aren't any, and how we treat residential, and whether we allow for multifamily to be on its own, or whether we allow residential that fits regardless, but it has to be part of a commercial, or it has to be on the same site with commercial, something. Yeah,
Is
we
this
can look
yours?
at that.
I think it's mine.
So, but after that issue, are there any other concerns or issues that have popped up that you all would like to address before we jump into the administrative side of things?
I think we've messed that up enough that we can move on.
Got you all confused there, Michael.
Oh, that's good.
Well, I'm confused myself because,
I am as well.
We can definitely bring back, so what we've identified is there's really two areas that you wanna have a discussion on. I think we're gonna bring back some best practices for y'all to look at. I think we're gonna bring back some options on all ends of the spectrum, so from one side to the other and anything in the middle. We'll do that related to parking, to food trucks, to residential components, and to development in general, for those areas. So that'll revolve around zoning, that'll revolve around, the multi-use, area, and that'll revolve around the walkability, and things of that nature. So those are all issues we're gonna address, and then the size, of lot sizes for, food trucks or other options that might be involved with that development as well.
The only other thing I'd add with the food trucks is it did come up in discussion previously. When were proposing the food truck, they were putting it behind a leather shop. Well, the question arose, well, but when the leather shop closes, is it because it is an extension of that business, should not the food truck close? Well, the obvious intent of the food truck was to feed the bar. It wasn't to help the leather shop. So I think we need to kind of tie those two items together too.
and then one thing that always found is the bathroom situation. Because with any restaurant, you're required to have a bathroom. And so it's incumbent on the village again I guess we're going to have to put another public restroom off of Rio or off of, because we've got them on Wingfield
Well, we're gonna have one
On Country Club.
on Country
Country
Club.
Club.
I'm totally against putting orange and green porta potties down there.
Oh, yeah. No,
So
I'm with
with
you.
the food trucks, just kind of clarify on the use. The conditional uses are approved, for either a period of time that can expire, and they're granted for the use, not a specific person. However, the uses are being tied to the specific business on which it's being, applied for, just to ensure compatibility in the future. So if, like Backcountry Attitudes, when or if they close or relocate, that food truck that was approved for that business is no longer
longer
approved at that,
valid.
because their approval is tied to
the
that
business.
business itself, not to the location. So as a safeguard, we ensure that we're still meeting those, because the next business that could come in could be something that the parking no longer supports for the food truck, or different types of requirements would be enforceable that wasn't enforceable for this business type. So as a safeguard, we do look at that from a staff point of view to ensure the compatibility still remains. And then when we go into looking for bathrooms, so each facility is assessed on that as well, and the structure type on which that they're applying for. So according to New Mexico code, if you provide any type of eatery availability, so sit down, anything like that, you are required by law to provide a wash and restroom facility. If the nature of the food truck is solely intended as prepackaged to go, you are void from that requirement. The only outskirt around that is if you provide a table to sit down, and you are located within 300 feet of a public restroom, you do not have to maintain one on site.
So prepackaged was,
Well, and not necessarily prepackaged, but
Like-
the prepared foods in a container to go, not open-faced plates where you're putting
Yeah.
it on a tray. It's something intended to grab in a
away.
bag
but
and,
making a barbecue sandwich and wrapping it up is packaged.
yes,
And here's the soda water.
yep. But if you were to just do open face on a tray to, and give them, their silverware, they're supposed to bring your tray and your silverware back. You are now needing to provide them some place to sit. It's no longer a disposable type of meal to where they.
So that's a key indicator, is that if you provide any kind of seating
You are required a wash and.
and
restroom
trash
facility.
cans.
So, we already assess, the trash cans on site, just because we understand people will be walking around and stuff like that. But we do ask during the application process, are you providing tables? Are you providing anything like that? So we can ensure the compatibilities further into the nature of the request to ensure that all of those questions are addressed at the time of the original hearing.
Kind of walk me through the idea that you have the food truck and then you get a burger and fries and they bring it to you or serve it to you in just a cardboard tray, and that's handed out. But there's no seating, for
That's intended as all disposal, so you're not getting.
anything
back.
back. And if they hand out utensils that are plastic, there's no
That's
anticipation that
still a
those would come in.
disposable item,
Gotcha.
as long as they're not providing any type of.
Seating.
eating and seating.
But when we get into the restrooms, aren't those have to be ADA compliant?
There are different types of things that trigger that.
Okay.
So new construction, 100%. Existing facilities, depending on the amount of change to the structure, would require that. And a lot of the different types of the structure that could trigger that would be based upon the occupancy type. So if you're going from a retail to, let's see, something that would be higher than that, be more of a grocery store. So if you're going from a boutique to a grocery store, you now have to readjust your building to meet those specific change of occupancy codes on a building. That could trigger a substantial change. Now, all of your doorways have to be ADA compliant, your entrance has to be ADA compliant. Restroom facilities, if open to the public, have to be ADA compliant.
And that's why none of them
Rest,
are.
say that again?
A restroom, if you have that open to the public, would,
But if you have food, it will have to be open to the public.
only if you allow them to sit and consume on your
Okay.
premise.
So, Mayor, question, this last applicant,
That's what,
he had
restrooms already
restroom
within his
facilities, but they weren't ADA compliant.
Like
So
36
back to-
steps or something.
Yeah.
So back to Stephanie's discussion or explanation on, if there's a substantial change to the area, because it's already a restaurant that was established and there's a bar location within there, he's just pushing in the truck or placing the unit, there isn't a substantial change to operations. He would be able to still utilize his current facilities, he wouldn't have to bring them up to ADA compliance. Now, if you had the, shop that is a leather shop, for example, that chooses to open a food truck and then put seating down, suddenly that's a substantial change. So they would have to supply
Turn it into a restaurant.
that
An orange porta potty is
or
wheelchair
provide a,
accessible.
accessible restroom in that case.
Are they orange? It just sounded,
So are porta potties allowed as far as your restroom? Because it seemed like from a health standpoint, you can't
No,
wash your hands.
just special events.
Special events only, and now porta potties, do actually rent out wash facilities as well. But they are not designed for, a long-term intent.
Okay, special events only. Thank you.
Anything else on that, or we can, okay.
We can move on because we can unpeel this onion and,
Yeah, we'd need a 24-hour workshop just for that.
Let's
well,
go-
and that's what I'm saying. I think we have to decide what is the Midtown area going to look like, start from that foundation, and then it can, all these other things can dovetail into it instead of, you know, are we going to allow the residential, what's the plan if we're moving away from that? Make sure we have that component that they can be purchased. How did we facilitate that? You know, there's a lot of things to that.
And Mayor and council, just as an aside, as we move down into the planning section today, during your review, you had some items related to Main Street. The Main Street program allows for block development programs, and there's several different opportunities. So depending on the direction council decides to take, that would identify opportunities for the village to apply in that direction based on where we want to go from a planning perspective to reconstruction to all of those things.
Okay.
With that, Mayor, we're gonna turn it over to Phyllis. We're gonna start on page 94, on the items that we passed out last time. That's your red line copy. As you recall, we went through the first section. The second section is the administrative side. And so we'll be touching high level, some of the items that we addressed, changed, that the Planning and Zoning Committee made recommendations on, and then any discussion points that you all would have from that.
Okay. So, the whole purpose of this section was trying to sort of clean up.
Our chairs are vibrating.
yeah, I'm like,
Try to get it more comfortable, but
What do you mean your chair is vibrating? It's not.
The whole room was. So the whole, purpose of this was to kind of simplify what's in the code. Anything that could be a piece of paper that's handed out in the community development department that explains a process, we sort of took out, and I did bring one example of what these handouts might look like. And so I'll just go through. For the administrative, there are some processes, and if you recall, going back to the table in the beginning that sort of says what process, let me see what page it's on, what process goes with what. It's on page 81 that summarizes what's an administrative review, what's a planning commission review, and what comes to council. So you can refer back to that. But we said that the planning administrator would review the administrative processes, and they also provide a certificate of zoning compliance. And instead of having all the detail of what zoning compliance is in the code, that would be part of the getting the certificate of zoning compliance. Then on rezoning, we talk about what the purpose of that is. So for each process like this, we talk about what the purpose is. It just says it's a zone map amendment or rezoning. The purpose is to change the zoning of an area to meet land use needs of the village in conformance with the comprehensive plan and in conformance with state statutes. So it sort of defines what the purpose is. We talk about what the criteria for decision is. So they can apply for a zoning change if they can demonstrate that the original zoning that they have was a mistake, and I've seen that before, but it's very rare. If surrounding conditions have changed, so there's been a change, something went in next door, there was a change to a roadway configuration, something kind of major, or that it's more advantageous to the community as measured by compliance with the comprehensive plan. That's a pretty typical reason, and people try to describe how what they're doing is an advantage. They can't do spot zoning, and they have to have the infrastructure and public services or in place or can be feasibly provided to them. So for each type of change, we have the purpose and the criteria for decision, and then the process. And the process is mostly the same. You can see the things that have been stricken, and I'm sorry, mine is blue for some reason. When I printed it last night, it was blue. We just took out any detail about that application, and there will be an application fact sheet that goes with somebody who wants to make a zoning request and what they have to include in their application. Do you have any questions about that one? And so this process would go through an initial administrative review and a staff recommendation to the planning commission, and then village council.
Okay, on that note of village council, because of something I heard earlier about going to our public hearings to all being quasi-judicial on there. So on the village council review, rezoning requests will be reviewed by the village council in accordance with the applicable public hearing procedures, unless withdrawn by the applicant.
This is the part that concerns me, because in my eyes, review,
Page 97, sorry.
Number 4.
Yeah, number 4.
so Mayor Pro Tem Salas and governing body, this is the part that concerns me. In my eyes, review is just looking at what had been presented and no new evidence. In my way of thinking too, a quasi-hearing, evidence is produced. In a public hearing, it may be considered and reviewed. So that's where I'm a little, I want that clarification, because if it's a review, then no new evidence should be presented. I think, that's my way of thinking and my understanding. And that's where I've gone back and forth with Zach, because I personally as clerk need a clarification on how I'm handling these meetings, what it is we're doing.
Mayor, can you give me an example of a review versus a hearing?
What we had last time with the last applicant for the, you know, that it was just what he had presented before, and then there's no new evidence. But if you have a quasi, then they can introduce new evidence that's been found or that supports, is that what you're saying?
Zach, yeah.
I think the difference, and maybe we need to clarify the language here in this process, if it's something where the council is getting a recommendation from P&Z and the council has the final decision, maybe you can introduce new evidence, but if you're gonna have that happen, what was the point of the planning and
Well,
zoning?
planning and zoning is when somebody doesn't agree with it, they appeal to the
Well, an
council.
appeal then is where you're just looking at the evidence and what
Right,
came
you're
from.
reviewing
No
what was
new
presented.
evidence.
No new
Correct.
evidence.
Okay, so see, that's.
Then they're gonna have a due process claim if they wanna take it to district court, so I always think the best thing to do would be give them a de novo review and allow them to just try the case right in front of you again.
Well, but Mayor, this example of the last instance, I believe the applicant introduce new evidence, didn't he?
I don't think that he had a due process claim on that because you guys gave him every opportunity to produce what had been produced below. And I agree, I think there was new evidence produced, new arguments made. He noticed an opportunity to be heard. There's no argument about that.
So Jenny, were we covered with that?
I think the issue is that it's not clear in the code. Is it a de novo review where you start over? Like it's a whole brand new trial? That's what it would be like in the courts. And you guys are sitting like as if you were a court. So maybe we should clarify that it's a de novo review, not just a review. Because when you're in court, and if you lose at the district court and you want to take it to the Court of Appeals, it's clear in the statutes or in the rules of civil procedure, do you get a de novo appeal or do you get a record review where the court just sits and looks at all the paperwork and then decides whether or not the court below made a mistake?
So it sounds like it needs to be a de novo review,
I would recommend that.
that if they're appealing,
Okay.
I mean, y'all understand that way there could be new additional evidence.
Instead of a quasi.
Well,
That is a quasi, because you're,
It would be quasi if it was a de novo review.
yeah, and so instead of having it like a regular item that we did, on which whenever it was, we didn't have it as the judicial.
And Mayor and Council, just to clarify, in the specific instance that was presented, that was an appeal process. And I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
The appeal process was the food truck.
Yes, sir.
The water one was a review.
Yes, sir.
That we had asked for the additional,
But he brought in new evidence, didn't he, Mayor?
well, he tried to, but he didn't have any. He just was, his interpretation of what the OSC said.
Correct. And so I think when you look at those things, and in relation to what we're following here, this is mainly regarding criteria for decisions related to zoning and rezoning. And so in those cases, P and Z is only making a recommendation, they don't have the final say.
Oh,
You would still
sure.
have that final say in this area.
On the zoning,
which is
yes.
why you would have that item under council
Yeah.
review, not necessarily the appeal process. So I just want to make sure it's in reference to this portion of 54, not the bigger piece.
So, Mayor Michael, we got tripped up with the 2/3 vote
Right.
issue. Is that in here now?
So,
Yes, and should it be?
yes.
It should be,
Should it be?
should it?
Shouldn't not.
Should
So the
not.
question that we're raising, and that should have been one of our other items on the back end, I guess we could have talked about. The question that comes into play is, do you as a council wish to, at any point in time, limit the authority that's given to you statutorily? And by that, your general authority is given to you on a majority vote. And Zach, please correct me if I misstate something. So your general authority is given to you on a majority rule. When you create items within statute or within ordinance or whatever, in this case, creating a 2/3 vote, you have limited your authority on a decision-making process.
Right.
And
But
so,
I thought that was mandated by the state.
No, it's simple majority by the state, that somewhere down here, our ordinance, we increased it sometime back to 2/3.
I don't think,
Jesus.
yeah, I think that we shouldn't have
Just
it
have a
that
simple
way.
majority.
I think it should be simple majority, because we've done that, I mean, ever since I've been on the council for 6 years, it's, the mayor, every once in a while,
Well, that's just on a regular item that I get to vote on this. The mayor
but
does
you've
not
done,
vote.
but you have
But-
done for hearings, for public hearings, also.
So, Mayor, that you're not voting, is that state statute or is that?
Yes.
by-
Yes, that's state statute
That's state
on
statute.
a
It also
appeal.
says he can vote, but it's not counted.
Yeah,
No, it says that in the statute. It explains that, it says, and that's where I went
It
round
shows
and
his
round with Ron.
well, and
It says
so,
that the mayor may vote, but it shall not be counted.
and so what it is kind of like a sway to get up and, do your bit
Advocate.
to advocate for one or the other, and then,
But going back to my first statement, I heard that all our public hearings are gonna now be quasi judicial.
Yes,
hearing.
that's what we said.
Mayor, can I
I'm kinda.
explain that?
I'm not against, I'm against that for that reason. If we say that and impose that, you won't ever get to vote, and then we got a 3-3 tie,
And it
and
fails.
it kills the,
I
the,
understand. I'm
the
just trying
item.
to fit, yeah.
So to me, there are certain situations that you'll need that, and rezoning is one of them. Or annexation, because I just have clarification when we get to annexation. So, that's what I'm concerned, if we
Oh, I
make
am
that
too.
decision.
I am too. I just needed the guidance, I just needed to be clear. I mean, as I'm even thinking right now, every time we have a planning and zoning issue that comes, a recommendation that comes, what's the difference between a recommendation coming to the governing body and an appeal? Either, that recommendation could come and they could deny it.
Right, so
They
the
could.
recommendation, is when the, approval authority is not held by the planning commission, so the.
Like
planning-
zoning.
But if an appeal,
Appeals are, to come forth and appeal the decision that was given.
To the
so-
applicant.
And that would be based on a variance or.
Yes.
Yeah,
A
conditional use.
So
conditional use
I can see
or
the
a site
distinction in
development
those
plan.
items, but
But it is muddy between simple majority and 2/3. We find a lot of contradictions in the codes on how that governs the planning commission as well. So that is one thing we'd like a little bit of guidance on, is how do y'all feel moving forward? Should we do simple majority? Should we do 2/3?
I'd say
Because the
simple
2/3
majority.
has come up on a P and Z where we thought something could have been approved, same as what y'all experienced, but the math did not support it.
And as long as you have a quorum, the simple majority as of the counselors or planning commissioners present. Right?
Well, effectively though, with a 6-member council, a majority vote is 2/3, isn't it?
Basically,
2/3 is gonna be 4 votes, so
Right.
majority is gonna,
with the mayor not voting.
yeah, I mean,
Not
that.
counting.
simple majority.
So again, Mayor, what I'm hearing is you can't vote no matter what.
Not on an appeal, is what I've found out,
By state statute.
by local
By
statute.
our ordinance.
No,
And, by state.
by state statute.
But you
Yeah,
can
the
vote,
2/3 was local.
you can vote, but it can't be counted.
Yep.
So how long has this particular ordinance been in place as far as this section requiring 2/3 to overturn
Because we haven't.
planning commission?
So it was first enacted in 2009 with a revision in 2008.
So what was it before that, if I may ask?
1985.
Was it a majority then?
Simple majority.
Simple majority.
1985.
So I wonder why they changed it. I don't know.
I don't know.
So that would be, 30 years?
So Zach, what will we be doing? Are they gonna be, our recommendations coming from planning and zoning going to be,
40 years it's been in place.
I don't know that I'm fully on board with the idea that the mayor can't vote. Because this section that I relied on the other day on the food truck appeal, 321-9, it says a person agreed by the zoning authority or any board or bureau of the zoning authority may appeal the decision pursuant to, oh, wait a minute, that's the appeal to district court. But throughout that, when it talks about the appeal to the zoning authority, you, the governing body, which includes the mayor, is defined in statute as the zoning authority. Y'all delegate certain authority to the zoning commission, but ultimately you are the zoning authority, the entire governing body. So I'm kind of in conflict with another opinion that we received that the mayor can't vote. Because I don't see, if you're a member of the governing body, of the zoning authority, why do you not have a vote?
let me see if I can find that. It's on that statement that I had.
Not the
Let me go
governing
get that
body when
statement.
you're doing it.
So with that then, the question is, also a
It's the zoning
section on
authority.
our ordinance says
Not the
to the
council.
council. And to me, that means the council, but the governing body includes the mayor.
In case of a tie, is the way we do regular.
Copeland and I talked about it for an hour and a half, and he reached the same
But it
conclusion.
does state council in the ordinance on the appeal process, in the appeal process.
Should have went with, we should have.
Yeah, yeah, I think we talk about the governing body, but we do village council.
Mayor, while we're contemplating that, can I go over again,
So does it mean
quasi judicial?
route?
You guys generally sit in a legislative capacity where you're adopting policy that affects either the entire village or large parts of the village. Quasi judicial simply means that you're not sitting in your legislative capacity, you're now sitting in your judicial capacity, making a decision about one particular piece of property or one very small, easily identified group of properties or people. So that's just a distinction between the authority or what the legislative body does versus what the judicial body does in a three-branch form of government. So you could sit in your quasi judicial capacity, but hear different types of appeals or reviews. That's where the de novo or record review comes in. So just, I got the sense that there was some confusion between what capacity you're sitting in, legislative or judicial, versus what you're doing while sitting in those capacities.
And the executive sometimes gets to sit in the legislative on regular items. But
You're the
does it-
presiding
and-
officer that occasionally gets to break a tie. And
And does that
maintains.
carry on to quasi?
What's
judicial?
that?
Does that carry over to the judicial side?
I'm sorry, I didn't,
Does that carry over
Oh.
to the judicial side? Because that's, and I'm trying to remember where I've heard that or learned that. I don't know. I can't remember reading it, but.
again, I think that the statute defines the zoning authority in the zoning or the zoning statutes defines the zoning authority as the governing body.
So we could change, I mean, we refer throughout as the village council. Should that all change to governing body?
I think it should make reference to governing body.
You too.
Yeah.
So starting on page 4,
It would be all the way through,
everything that says village council.
yeah.
Because I
We've
can't,
had some knucklehead mayors. Maybe that's why they put that in there.
I was trying to think who was the mayor back then, and I think it was White.
George White.
Because
in
then,
2008?
no,
85.
in 85.
40 years.
It seems like
It
if,
might-
if you were sitting in a judicial capacity, though, you would have a vote. I mean, in any series of judges, chief justice or not, or senior justice, you still have a vote.
And to
Absolutely.
break a tie,
I mean,
Well,
I
no,
can't
think that came
imagine.
more out of Robert's rules where the tie breaking, but the way he's split it out, if it's if you're sitting in a judicial capacity, that would entitle you to a vote.
I just can't imagine somebody appealing and the mayor not being able to vote and it's a 3-3 tie and we go,
Well,
I don't
and
know.
this particular situation, Mayor, was embarrassing because, you know, we led the applicant to believe.
that they had.
And then we find out, no, he didn't. So I just want to make sure we know what the rules are.
Again.
I think you have two different issues that you're discussing, and one of those issues is separated into two subcategories. That first issue is how do you sit as a body, whether it's judicial or legislative, and then the voting components.
I agree.
And then I think Jenny's question is, which should we do moving forward from that perspective of should all meetings be quasi-judicial or should they all be a public hearing component? That's one question in front of you. On the other side, you have this piece, which is referencing how you hear certain cases on your council review. And I think that's a different discussion. you may wanna first identify how we wanna address those meetings first.
Okay, so you're saying an appeal would be different,
Yes.
inordinately, but between that and a public hearing,
Yes, sir.
right?
So you're, in most cases, and I think what we can spell out to help is if you were reviewing something as an appeal, back to the judicial side, where you're sitting in a judicial component and making a decision on a single case or a group of small cases, then you should have your quasi-judicial hearing established, so that you can say, hey, there's no other information that's being brought in, we are hearing what you are saying, that is the issue, we make a final decision, if you disagree with us, you go to district court.
And the appeal should be based on an erroneous application of the code. It's not because
Right.
somebody really wants to do something.
That's the only reason they appeal is because they don't like the decision.
Well, yes, but
There are
That-
criteria that they have to follow to meet.
Be able to appeal.
But you would say that the decision of the planning and zoning was not erroneous.
Or arbitrary and capricious.
Who would make that determination then, before?
The plan, it comes out
I mean,
planning
as
and
far as
zoning,
the
they check
appeal.
off the boxes if it,
Well, she's saying that.
And that's one of the
appeal is
reasons
based
why
on-
we wanted to get criteria for decision in all of these categories, so that there's something that you, and the criteria come out of the state statute, and then you have something to hang your hat on when you deny somebody that they did not meet those criteria.
And I think planning and zoning bends over backwards to define precisely how they made their decision. I mean, I've seen the citings. It's
Yeah.
both statute and ordinance. And that's how that.
And
food
because
truck-
it's appealed to you on the basis of whether that was an arbitrary
Very
and capricious
capricious.
decision, that's what you're reviewing, is that decision, not a whole new case.
So if they come in to appeal a planning commission's decision, per the code, they are required to show where the code was violated by the planning commission. If they do not have the evidence that the code was not reviewed by the planning commission, they're unable to make.
And I think that's why, at least for my 6-year brief tenure, or soon to be, that's why we rarely ever override the planning and zoning decision, because it's demonstrated that they've aligned it with the statutes and the ordinances, and this is why we made our decision. So for us to go against it would be really to vote against the ordinance as it was so stated, because you cite it right in the minutes, which we appreciate.
But you still respect the appeal process.
No, I do. I'm not saying you can't. You've still got to allow them their due process, but otherwise they just jump shift to district court. But I'm just saying, I think that in the process of reviewing it on our side, from a judicial standpoint, we're looking at were the rules followed, and what was the rule that made you feel that this was not agreeable, food court or whatever it is.
Can I make a comment on that? In general, I agree, but when it comes to a variance, because variances, that's an opportunity to go around the strict reading of the rules and regulations. And that's the statute that I was citing the other day specifically says that the zoning authority, that means you guys, have the ability to overturn the Planning and Zoning Commission, but it's only you guys who have that ability. The Zoning Commission, because they're not elected officials, because they were delegated certain tasks, they don't have the authority to really go around the law, so they've got to stick to the letter of the law. That it gets appealed to you, that statute says, all right, for these, and the cases say that, you guys do have much broader authority to get around the law to award a variance in cases that you think are appropriate for the town.
But I'm still confused whether or not the mayor can break the tie.
Yeah.
So, this, state statute 3-2-2E, in those municipalities where a mayor council form of government, when there is a requirement that a certain fraction or percentage of the members of the entire governing body or of all the members of the governing body, or other similar language other than the requirement of a simple majority vote for the measure, the mayor shall not be counted in determining the actual number of votes needed, but he shall vote to break a tie.
So what that says is, if
That's-
we
that's
as,
a contradiction.
if we as an entity have created another rule, only then will that apply in that situation.
Because this is the statute that the league had the mayor read.
Yes.
I
So,
mean,
so
his
the way
statement.
that's stated, and Zach, please help.
Tell me the statute number again?
3-12-2E.
So in the instance that we as an entity or the village establish any other voting requirement, in this case, the supermajority, then the mayor can't vote. However, if we go back to simple majority in every portion of our instance, then the mayor does have the ability to vote in any case.
But is the
outside of
vote
this.
counted, Jenny?
But this
It
said,
does in
this
simple
said,
majority.
It does in simple majority if we do not create our own voting standard. If we create our own voting
Other
standard,
Which
then
we
it
did at
eliminates the mayor
two-thirds.
from the voting process.
So how
except
do
for
we
to
fix
break
it?
a tie.
We change everything to simple majority on a voting process and.
By governing body.
By governing body,
By
yes, sir.
governing body.
So we would go back through the ordinance, through chapter 54, we would change everything to governing body, and in any case where there is a reference to a higher number of voting officials, that would be removed and just changed to simple majority.
Yeah, we'll get rid
And
of
in
that.
that case, the mayor would vote in every instance.
I think there was,
For that,
So am I.
So in public hearings for variances and rezones, that's a quasi by the governing body?
well, they're,
That's quasi because they're deciding on a single piece of property.
they're all.
But we're mixing two things, so at that point, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a hearing, a quasi, or if they're in their legislative capacity. In every piece of code that we have, or in every piece of reference to a vote, it needs to be made simple majority.
Because we have that authority through state statute, and we can go back to that.
Correct.
So the decisions,
Yes.
the places where we show decisions not with
Simple majority.
not for the village council, are conditional use permit
Yeah, they just get appeals.
and a site development plan and a final construction plan, which is really an administrative decision. So I can't
I
imagine.
think with
anything.
annexation too.
Well, I just want to voice my opposition to changing it to a simple majority, and it's only this reason why. This has been in place for 40 years. We've never had any type of controversy about it except for this one particular issue here. I believe that the planning commission is put in, they've all sworn an oath, and they do the diligence as far as review. I believe that for the council to overturn, that it should have and essentially, it's not a supermajority, but it is a two-thirds majority of the members present. I believe it's really just this one particular issue that's even causing us to say, oh, wait a minute, we need to go to a majority. But I believe that it's been in place, it's worked. In 12 years that I've been on the council, that we've had any of these appeals come to us, there has never been an issue. There's never been any type of, well, we should have done it a different way, we shouldn't have voted that way, this and that and the other thing. It's only because of this food truck with Jasper Riddle that we're even discussing this. It's never been an issue before, and I really think that we really need to honor the Planning and Zoning Commission's, their decision, and that if we're going to overturn, that it needs to be
Two-thirds majority.
two-thirds
Two-thirds of the council.
of the council, and we need to change the word present, because it does say of all of its members.
So
we just
again-
need to change that.
Again, it's two-thirds of the council, not including the mayor.
Well, you don't even have to put that in there
Didn't you
because
just
the
say
state
the mayor
statute
could break
just
a
says,
tie?
it already
Not on
provides for that.
two-thirds.
No, the state statute doesn't provide for that. The local ordinance
I
provides for
thought
that.
that's what it said.
But she says that if we have provided otherwise.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not a state statute, it's an ordinance. That we went
That's
to
my
the
argument
two-third.
on it, because we're allowing one case
Joe, we've had the two-thirds before. I'm just trying to remember specifically that this has come up. Because I can remember a big argument over, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was
Well,
on
there,
the two-thirds.
historically, there've been several instances
On
where
two-thirds.
P and Z's been overturned.
Well, yeah, but.
But
I mean,
with
this wasn't the first time
No.
that's ever happened.
No,
This is the first time that the majority issue has come up.
yes.
Very first time.
Yes.
But the thing is, it's about a material difference that the elected officials can do as opposed to an appointed body that has to follow the letter of the law. And that's what it brings to the council, the ability to make that change, because I did talk to several of the commissioners that said they felt like they wanted to move forward, but they were bound
Right.
by the rule, and it's up to us to change that rule. And that's what some of them were looking at us like, well, y'all did the right thing, and then what? Because they felt like it should have moved forward, not just because of Jasper Riddle, but that it's a movement in that comprehensive plan direction. And that's what they said, is that they were bound by the law, that we, as the governing body, can change that and give that variance. And that's what they were saying. So
Well,
that's why we were looking at the,
I would say that, yes, we could change that, but also, in my decision-making is, should we change it at that particular moment in time? And that's what my whole issue is with that, as far as voting against it. Should we change it at that time? And to me, it's almost an abandonment of the entire ordinance to have moved forward at that time. You're disregarding the whole language of the ordinance.
That's what the statute gives you the authority to do.
Right.
But I don't think, me in my capacity, I should do that.
I feel as an elected official, I have that
That's
right.
why we're
well, that's why
here.
you're elected to make those decisions, I feel
Right.
like.
That's where I'm at. But going back, if I may say, Joe, to 1985, when this was 40 years ago, right? When it was codified, I just have to think right there, while from 45 to 85, I'm pretty sure it was simple majority with just 5 members on this council. So that, I mean, I'd have to do my research and stuff. So at some time, again, it might have been Davis, mayor at that time, in 85, 84. I think he came in 84. I should go look at the pictures. But that may have started the supermajority and all that. Because I do remember a time when there was 3 ladies on the council seat that, man, that blew up. I think you were on there when that same thing, like what you were saying, wait a minute, we need to have the supermajority, but yet it is there with the mayor voting.
Oh, I'm fine. If the rest of the council wants to go that route, I'm fine with that.
But I see your
I do
point
that.
though, Joe, I
just
do,
express my opinion.
right.
I think what we're trying to do is just clear up this section, because if you look on page 5, under the Board of Appeals, which is how they come to y'all, in section E, yeah,
It's right at the very beginning.
it states here, review and decision, that the council is to, consider all the testimonies of the appellant. And at the very end, it says, then council, by a 2/3 vote of all of its members, may reverse an order, decide in favor, or make a change in any order. But then it's followed by a contradiction, is which we're trying to, clear. If the council fails to decide by a 2/3 vote of all of its members, or if it decides by a simple majority, that the planning commission shall stand. However, it states right before then that there wasn't the opportunity, it shall be by 2/3, but then their input, the contradiction piece. So now we're just trying to ensure that we have a clear direction for y'all
Yep.
on how this is supposed to be rendered. Is it 2/3 or is it simple majority
But it did say all of the members.
It did say,
of all of its members?
All of its
However-
members.
It does
This-
say council
This is
vote.
one component. What Jenny read said if you have something that says there has to be, or if
Two-thirds.
if you create a different voting structure, then
That's-
in that case, you as
It
a
supersedes
member
that.
cannot vote. So this may say all members, but that then comes into play and it does not allow you to vote.
So sometimes the mayor is considered a member and sometimes he isn't?
Well, based on what that hearing is, in the case that we ever create a higher number of votes required than a simple majority, the mayor would be removed based on that statute. So,
And that's what
which
we've
removes authority from
demonstrated
the
we
council.
have, because we put in that requirement.
Whichever, it needs to be clear.
Page 5, here it is.
Well, I'm gonna go way more.
Yeah, it's just a contradiction of terms.
It's a big contradiction.
Government speak.
So
Well, it is.
I think the discussion from the council side is, if you're willing to have a 2/3 vote, I think it's just understood that the mayor loses his vote on those instances. And if the council wishes to keep the mayor's vote, then it needs to go to simple majority from a voting perspective. Those are the two.
And I'll just put in this 2 cents. If you're gonna have something that's that critical to a vote, everybody that's elected should be known what their vote is.
Yeah, that's exactly
And
right.
to be held accountable for it, instead of saying, geez, I was for this, but, geez, I was for that. I think that it's transparency that you vote and you have to stand by your vote.
And I think the language, to go back to the initial intent of language, is everyone votes. I don't know if the council was aware that there was a statute that canceled out the mayor's vote at the time.
No.
And so, the intent is specifically for the entire body to vote, but it doesn't allow you to vote because of another statute that exists. And again, I don't know if there was any.
Well, it'd be more consistent with the way we run everything else, because if not, let's
Yeah.
just have a 2/3 vote on everything.
And it's rare
Well,
that
that
it
would-
ever comes to you tying. I think you've only
No,
done
I've
it twice. since
2 or
I've
3
been on.
times in the whole time I've been mayor, and pro tem too.
But arguably, Mayor, those are gonna be on a big issue.
And they are,
just
and
like
that's
it
why I think everybody should be accountable, not just the counselors, because I've been on both ends of it, but that everybody that sits up here should be able to weigh in and then be held accountable for their vote. But that's just my opinion.
So the other question would be, are we talking about all members or all members present as long as you have a quorum?
I think you have to have a quorum.
Well, yeah, you would have to have a.
No, that's what I'm saying, it would just be a quorum, because otherwise you may not get issues heard.
Right.
Because if someone's out sick or on vacation or whatever, then you couldn't hear that issue. Right?
Right.
So I think it would have to be present, and providing there's a quorum.
And I think unfortunately that's implied, but sometimes it's actually specified, but I think during the original writing, it was implied that you're only hearing it if you have a quorum anyway. So we'll just.
Well, you couldn't take any action without the quorum anyway.
Correct.
Oh. Okay.
But of those present, not, because it stated of the
Members.
members.
So, just to clarify, again, are we leaving the
2/3.
2/3 component, or are we clarifying with simple majority?
Well,
or-
it depends if the mayor votes or not.
If it's simple majority,
He gets to
mayor
vote.
gets to vote. If it's 2/3,
He
the
doesn't.
mayor does not get to vote.
See, and I just don't understand why they would ever limit that if you're voted in. What would be the argument there, Joe?
Right, yeah.
I don't get that.
There must have been, had to have been some discussion when they changed
Does
it.
it have to be correct, though?
Well, it hadn't been for 40 years.
Just to clarify, the local ordinance is not allowing the mayor to vote.
Yeah.
That allows the mayor to vote. The state statute,
Says no.
it says no. If you create a new voting structure outside of simple majority, then you cannot vote. So it wasn't the village.
It was the
it's
state statute.
Well, it was actually the village, because if your requirement is a 2/3 vote and it does not reach that, then the mayor doesn't need to vote because it hasn't acquired that, so the appeal failed.
It would fail.
So essentially, our ordinance eliminated the mayor.
So how do you normally make decisions? Does the mayor vote?
Yeah, if there's a tie.
If it's a tie,
Only if
It's a
it's a
tie. Well,
tie.
you would still vote if it's a tie, right?
Well, they're saying no.
No.
In this one, it says if it's not simple majority, or if there's a creation of a new item, then it's only of the present members, not the mayor.
I thought you read that except in the case of a tie.
Other than a simple, if it's something other than a simple majority.
Yeah. So if it reaches a tie on the appeal, it hasn't reached that
But
two-thirds
doesn't it
threshold.
say only in a
Thus
tie
eliminates
you
the mayor,
can?
because it has failed.
Well, yeah, again,
You can
it's,
break a tie, but it doesn't
Well,
count.
it's-
simple majority is 2/3.
Well, unless the mayor votes, and then it's not. So if you have a 3-3 tie and the mayor votes, then you're out of the 2/3.
That's where I got hung up too.
No, I don't.
There's a simple majority, because when I looked at Mary Roberts rules and I looked at simple majority and I put in our numbers,
Yeah, it's one over.
Yeah, it is 2/3.
Unless there's a tie like we do in regular items, and then the mayor votes. And that would wipe out a
See,
2/3.
Susan, had you not called in, we wouldn't have had this problem.
No, I voted.
I know.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, it's my fault.
So it's all her fault.
well, I stand in my position of keeping simple.
Nothing is simple.
Simple,
Allowing the mayor to, with the mayor's vote counting.
yes. That's just me.
But if it's state, we can't do that.
When did it become state? While ago it was local.
City, yeah, local.
Because the local entity created a new structure, then it now goes to that statute as.
But the local structure's 2/3 without the mayor voting. This said
Threshold.
simple majority.
So on page 5, the local structure is 2/3, including the mayor. That's why there's so much
This may not be
confusion.
that.
Yeah, because it wouldn't even matter.
And it raises the bar for you guys to be able to exercise some statutory authority that the legislature has given you by binding you to a 2/3 as opposed to a simple majority. The legislature in that statute said you can overturn the zoning commission by a simple majority. But then in our ordinance, we turned around and said 2/3 majority.
Which is the same thing if the mayor doesn't vote.
But keeping it a simple majority just gives y'all more power to, in this case, issue a variance or
And that's what
work around
Joe
your
said.
ordinances.
So, of present. So if you're short, but you still have a quorum, it's just a simple majority.
And I think there also needs to be another level of clarification that I don't think happened in this appeal process that should have happened. Who was it? I believe Councilmember Salas mentioned it, that when you're reviewing, maybe as an entity, you first identify, did they meet the threshold or that requirement to say, do you have an appeal first and foremost?
Correct.
And if they did, then you move on to the appeal.
Right.
In this case, I don't think we did that as a.
No, we just assumed that they met the criteria and heard it.
So that's the component I think that needs to be evaluated as we do that, because we're evaluating the checkboxes and we submit and we say yes, based on their submission was based on they believe this, and this was met, and that's how we submit it. But the governing body really should evaluate, did they in fact, you're submitting based on this requirement, is it in fact meeting it?
But it's almost like, here's the rules that we're trusting, the planning and zoning that Joe wants to make sure that we all stay in respect, and we do. That on the sidebar, we should have had them put a little notation at the bottom, but we're bound by these rules, but we would really like to see this go through, because that's what they said. but they were bound by these rules and it should be changed. So then we start the change process.
Oh, but even before that, Mayor, we're saying, did they even, so in this instance, the criteria is, did they meet what was the actual wording, violation of the
Well, erroneous application of the code
erroneous application of the code?
or an arbitrary decision.
So,
Right.
so did planning and zoning actually erroneously have a decision? And if the answer is yes, then you all should hear the appeal.
Yep.
If the answer is no, the appeal never should have been heard.
Well, and that's what they're saying. No, there was not erroneous, but we really think that we need to make a change.
And that's where you
But
all
that's where we're
rewrite
looking at
54.
changing the requirement.
Yeah.
But see, they're in the code more than we are. And so they have a better feel for it. And so that's why we listen to what they say, but when they're saying something is not right, we think there should be a change. It should be up for review, but if it's not erroneous, then we don't even talk about it.
Well, they could have asked for a variance to begin with.
Yes.
No, they didn't,
Why?
because there's no setbacks, and you can't grant variances for uses.
No.
May I make a comment? That statute that,
Wouldn't the variance be to the 10,000 square feet or 12,000 square feet?
No, because it's.
I think, what have you got, Zach?
Any
Zachary,
dimension
in that
of
same
land?
ordinance on the appeal to you guys that gives you the authority of to overturn or to grant a variance on a majority vote, it says that one of the things that you can consider is, or should consider, is whether or not the denial was contrary to it specifically says the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And that applicant on his appeal paperwork referred back to the comprehensive plan and said that it wasn't, denying the variance would not be in compliance with the comprehensive plan.
That was included when.
Yeah, they brought it up.
Brought it up.
You brought that up.
And that was one of the reasons.
So in order to apply for an appeal, it needs to be on the form. It shall state the name and address of the applicant. Should be filed within 15 days of the decision being appealed. And it states that it shall specify the error in which the decision made by the planning commission in the enforcement of this article or any of the ordinance adopted pursuant thereto. So that's how
I.e. the
they-
comprehensive plan.
That's what his submission was.
Well, I
And
think,
that's what his was based on, so when we get that, we make sure that it meets things, it does get reviewed by Zach. Zach makes sure that it is in accordance with it, and then it gets presented to the village clerk for scheduling.
This reminds me of statistics class taught by Korean, that I couldn't understand the first thing about any of it, and I think I got a grasp on it, and then it just goes away.
I think we should include more of the statute.
I don't know, I'm stuck on that whole process, so what do we want to do?
And Mayor and Council, that's when we had those calls with the New Mexico Self-Insurance Fund Municipal League. That was, and Jenny visited with her liaison staff. It was confusing even when we had those discussions.
There's a recommendation, that we include a little bit more of the
The
language
statute language in here.
here for the decision-making process, and include it in the administrative piece so that we can spell it out a little bit better.
Joe, who grants the appeal? Because you were stating that they have to prove this and that, or show, and then otherwise they are not granted the appeal, so who makes that decision?
No, that's the information that's presented to the governing body.
And then we're supposed to make the decision, but last time, we assumed that it was already there. So we're supposed to review to make sure they've checked all the boxes and say, okay, we'll hear the appeal or we deny the appeal.
So,
Would that
So-
be?
And then you would either uphold the decision of the planning and zoning or reverse it.
So the administrator makes sure all the boxes are checked, which is what we did. And yes, they reference the comp plan, yes, this item was submitted, yes, we see that, we present that information to the body. Zach reviewed it just to make sure that they hit that item. I think that the hearing component should have been, does this actually meet the comprehensive plan, or does it fail to meet the comprehensive plan? If that standard was met, then we can continue hearing the appeal.
So, Mayor and Zach, so in the judicial hearing, fair hearing, we're sitting in a judicial capacity, is that correct? And was it my understanding that because of that, the mayor is no longer really mayor, he's just a sitting member of that judicial hearing? So he would then be allowed to vote, is that correct?
Only on a tie.
And so the question is, if we do a simple majority, then it has to be 1/3 if there's 6 of us. And is this really as much of a linchpin as I think we've made it out to be? If we had left it alone, and let's go back to how it went down the first time. It was 3 up, 3 down.
Right.
And we were sitting in the judicial capacity. At that time, then, the mayor did have a legitimate vote. And so he voted it up, basically.
Yep.
And so that would have been the end of it.
That was my analysis that day sitting here,
I'm sorry.
based on this statute.
Right.
So who said that we did it wrong?
Well, I mean, it's not like a clear answer. I dispute the advice that we got from others, but because I was relying on the statute. The problem is we have an ordinance that's in conflict with the statute.
Right, okay.
Zach and
Because as I recall, at the end of that evaluation, there was this one sentence in that statute that said, or unless it had been otherwise stated, or something to that effect. Whereas if you already had a rule in place for a 2/3 majority, then that would not apply. Is that correct?
Well, I guess the league's determination was that the ordinance, because that statute gives you the authority to grant variances based on a simple majority, but we adopted that ordinance. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, but we took away what the legislature gave us. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Michael.
Mayor and council and Zach, on page 5, Stephanie just pointed this out, and I think it actually makes very clear sense. On section D, notice of hearing, it says, upon receiving the notice of appeal from the planning administrator, it doesn't say and or, the village, or in consultation with the mayor and village manager. Which means the mayor was acting in an administrative capacity at that point, not in the voting capacity. You've already seen the item. Then they shall place a request on a schedule for public hearing for the upcoming council meeting of the agenda. Her comment was, because it's already been seen and placed on by us, that it would be the council that would be voting.
So I would be biased. I'd have to recuse, basically.
But you've seen it and you've decided to make the placement of that item on the agenda. However.
Well, but we need to make sure I see it, because I didn't
Yeah,
see
did
it. No, it just ended up on it, and I made sure I didn't read it.
Correct.
Michael, where is that?
It's
Right here, Zach.
very-
Page 5.
Is this existing ordinance?
About processes.
Yep.
That's what we do.
And this
if
we
we-
didn't change.
So is it just a village area, also requirement that there's approval to place a public hearing on an agenda? Because I'm not, I mean, that's not a state thing, is it?
No.
So that's just a local,
That's been the local process.
But he's not hearing any evidence.
But
and is that to just give, is that just to give the governing body a heads up that we're going to have a public hearing, as opposed to just,
well, no, some of the ordinance says we have to request a public hearing.
and I guess I'm wondering why. Okay.
Because y'all may say that you don't want to.
But we can't deny.
Oh, I'm sorry.
request.
Pull that, I mean, change that.
But even a public hearing that Zach's always crowing on about giving people,
Due process.
due process. So I don't understand how we could deny a public.
I don't either. That's just been.
I've just wondered
And
that
this
whenever
was-
I receive it from you all, that we need to hold a public hearing why I just don't place it on the agenda like I do a regular item.
Correct. So, Mayor and Council, with this item, I know we can talk about it in general for a long time.
I know.
I think our question is, we can bring it back to you at that final meeting, or if you all choose to give us direction, we can go either way. I'm not sure which one you all would like to do moving forward.
I agree with Counselor Solis.
If we wanted simple majority, we can definitely modify that section to incorporate that.
And Mayor, you might have your input too, but I think by simply stating that the village clerk in consultation with the mayor and/or village manager, and that way you can, if you're out of it, then we have that nullification at the beginning that gives you the vote, and then we're on a level playing field at that point.
And then I would just make that same recommendation to change anywhere we have village council to governing body.
Governing body.
Yes.
And then that language be.
And then the consultation would only be with staff. I mean, it has to do with whether the mayor is in administrative capacity or
And that's,
legislative.
that is finally the crux of it right there.
Yep.
Maybe I'm overthinking this, but why is it treated any different than any other item that the mayor sees that's going to be put on the agenda?
That was kind of my question too. I know there was one case many years ago that it was an appeal for the kid's place right over here in Denise.
Oh, yeah,
in
yeah.
that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And Zach told us any evidence that we've seen here, which was everything that went through P and Z on our agenda, said was null and void, and that had to be received to us. Well, we shouldn't have we can't take that account on it. That was back then. I mean, that was 8 years ago or something like that. However, that's where it just made me think, if we do have a quasi judicial hearing, public hearing, that all of us shouldn't have that in our agenda packet. And that when we come into the council room and call that meeting, then that's where we see everything that's right there. Which, even before that, there was discussion, I believe it was with Alborn, that when we do schedule quasi-judicially, have it as a special meeting. Because that one time, I forgot what it was, but it lasted like 4 hours.
With reference to this one?
Not that one, it
That was
was
a
just
High Mountain
another
Youth
one, it was
Star.
another, hearing, quasi-hearing that it was just a long one, and we talked about that when we have those specific hearings scheduled, have it as a special council meeting, and that's the only item on the agenda, so that we do have time. Because I even think we went into a closed session a couple of times to discuss what was right there. I don't know, I'm just trying to replay of other meetings that we had in there. But I'm still with simple majority on all our votings for all public hearings.
I think maybe we need to talk with you about how we
So what if it's
refer to
this
governing
issue's a
body.
tie?
And in the normal situation, but in the normal situation, is the mayor just vote to break a tie?
Yes,
So this should be the same.
yes,
That's what we're saying.
that's what I thought, but,
Well, as an elected official and a judicial,
2 hours later, that's why.
and I still think it's a good idea.
but I'd never taken into the concept of administrative as judicial. That totally bounced past me, but every time there's a public hearing, that we make sure that we're not biased in having those conversations.
I think it's okay if you guys receive the packet and review it individually, because you want to be prepared for
Yeah.
questions.
Right.
But you don't want to get together, you don't want to drive by and check out the property.
Well, or people approach us on the street,
Right.
because that happened to me when I was newly elected. They came up to me at the grocery store, and I didn't realize what it was even going on, because I hadn't seen the agenda yet. And then I had to recuse myself, because you said, have you had any ex parte conversations? It's like, ex parte, what does that mean? And then I said, yes, I have.
We had at planning and zoning meeting a couple weeks ago, and Michael and I, the commission heard the case, and then we thought it would be best we went into executive session, so we did. And in the executive session, one of the commissioners started talking about all this research he had done online about the applicant and all this, and started using that information to advocate one way or the other for the case. And when we left executive session, me and Michael said, we've got to get him to recuse himself. He did, and isn't helpful to the current conversation, but you can't go researching on your own either. But looking at the packet, it would be like a court looking at the file with all the pleadings and just getting ready to go in and hear the oral arguments on an appeal to district court.
As you're looking at the facts of the case that are before you and why they were denied, or
But it is evidence, and we should be able to read it, at least
Yeah,
to have
you can look
some-
at the whole packet, everything that's been everything that's been submitted.
Right. Because I would want to know personally why P and Z came to whatever decision they did. And why, and again, with the citing of the statutes that they used to make that determination. It kind of gives me a breath of fresh air that this wasn't just arbitrary, that they didn't like the guy or they didn't like.
and that would be on granting the appeal.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the recommendation should always come with the justification.
Yes,
Yes.
every time.
It does.
Okay, annexation on page 124, because I'm fixing to go swimming pretty soon.
Okay.
The pink highlighted is stated here with, or in your case, Phyllis, it's blue.
Yes, I'm blue.
Question for legal staff, if it changes the meaning or intent. I didn't understand that, because it seemed clear as mud to me, so.
What page is that?
On 124.
Okay.
So I apologize, I missed this. I would suggest that this actually, changes the legal requirement, because technically, when they hear it the first time, it's only about the land, it's not about the possibilities that can happen. It's strictly about the annexation, because they would end up hearing the development case.
So do you have any kind of agreement that you're looking at with an annexation that just says, yes, you can serve it? Not what the development would be, but that you can bring it in and you have the ability to serve it. That's what this is
Our
saying.
current ordinance says that you come in with all of that.
Yeah, I mean, everything that's not red is already there.
So
Right, there's only like 7 new words.
they would have to, and the idea is that whatever they're developing at the, so if they're asking for the annex is one thing. Once they come back to, this is what we would like to place on it, then they would have to provide that information, but the annex has to happen first, if they choose.
Well, except,
Evidence shall be provided showing that they have existing infrastructure not limited to streets, as it cannot be
an
a
economic
burden on the
burden.
village to provide such information
What I'm
to
saying
them.
is that I believe this is actually, from the annexations I've done previously, I believe this is actually in contradiction to state statute.
Okay.
So what are we talking about, it's undeveloped land?
That's the case in point. So if someone brings in barren lands, there isn't anything out there.
Well,
but
they
then
would
what
show
do you,
that they
but
have water
isn't the
rights.
annexation an implication that you can serve it?
Yes.
So wouldn't you want to know that you can serve it?
We would have to do that later.
But then you've already annexed it.
And that would make no
Correct.
sense.
So, and there's been challenges, and we can, I don't know if we wanna bring Coupler on some of that. I know that in 1998, there was one loss at the Supreme Court that said you don't have to show the requirement for service, because you don't know what the development's gonna be. It could be random use of land. And so we could be holding it for the next 20 years because we don't want development to occur. And if you have to show that it's serviceable, then the annexation would be denied based on that.
So do you have a holding zone then, if you bring something in without any, how do you zone it?
Stephanie, do you remember we did the one on Carrizo Canyon? How long ago was that? That
I remember
annexation?
that.
You'd have to
That
have a
was done
holding
in
zone.
2011.
Okay. I thought there was one done after that. We annexed that portion after that. I was already here when we did that little location there. We had all those homes.
You're right, Ron, that was maybe 6, 7 years ago,
Was
and it was
11 or
resident,
14?
and all they were wanting was sewer.
We found 3.
Yep.
I found,
Well, then you'd give it right.
an 8, 11, and a
And what if we
14 in
couldn't
the
see it?
annex files.
So it might have been
Might
14.
have been 14.
That was Kevin Clausen.
I thought Kevin was in Cedar Creek. Dean Hood was the
It was
one.
Dean
Hood,
Dean
yes,
was
that's
the
who it
one
was.
that presented.
Yes. Yep.
Getting my teachers confused.
Maybe that there's an availability of service.
But they pitched in to do them. They just wanted to get sewer line.
We gave them access.
And yeah, and that's where, because all their septics were failing.
What keeps the village from annexing property for future development?
Well, and that's the point we were talking about right now. The village can in fact annex property for future development. Based on this, we would have to show that.
No, the applicant has to show.
But we would be the
Be
applicant.
the applicant in that case.
We want
Oh.
to bring it in for development for the village.
And so
Well,
based,
as the applicant would be able to attest that we would be able to develop that
And
land.
then let's just
appropriately.
talk about, we've already discussed Fawn Ridge. You know, that we're looking at that with their water situation and applications at OSE and then the special taxing district and all that stuff. So we would show that we can service it, but they don't have the infrastructure. That's why we're doing the special taxing district, just for them, so that we could get the money to do the infrastructure.
So say, there's a lot of, undeveloped large tracts of land on Swiss Chalet.
Mm-hmm.
Say one of them wants to do it and they have, I don't know,
What-
let's say 8,500 acres, just random. And now they want to come into the village and they want to potentially put up 700 homes.
They would have to show,
We don't
if we can't service it,
sewer
then
out
they'd have to show their water line,
but they would
Right.
have to show that they.
the water.
But if we take this out of there,
But at
then
the-
now they don't see that and we're taking in something that
You don't have to
probably
take it
shouldn't
in.
have ever took in to
No, but
begin
at
with,
the
because
point
we
of
shooting
development,
ourselves.
So when they submit a development plan, they have to show that they are providing services to connect.
Well, I know of 2 cases. One was at Rio Rancho and one was Campbell Ranch in Bernalillo County. And they both, the existing water system said they couldn't serve them. So they annexed to an adjacent jurisdiction, a different jurisdiction, or had a shoestring. And then when they got annexed, those jurisdictions said, just kidding, we can't serve you. And they're still sitting there.
So there is a letter, so I know that in the
Wow.
regular application compliance, there has to be a letter that's submitted by the local utilities that say, if something does come, there can be service. They have to provide the infrastructure, but this area is serviceable. So if it's a water district, if it's a utility, if it's anything like that, they still have to provide that as part of the application for annexation.
Yeah, well, that should be for any application that they can be served.
So do we supply Swiss Chalet with sewer?
I don't believe that sewer goes up to that area over there, just.
So what do they got, a
Yeah,
septic
they'd
system
have to
for the
have
whole
septic.
hotel?
I got a monster or something.
Yeah, I don't believe that area is serviced, but I'll verify.
Well, I mean, I know we have water.
Yeah.
But if it's if there's a certain area that's annexed and there's new construction, the requirement would be that they would have to build out infrastructure
When I
to
was
connect
last on council,
to our.
controversial, they wanted to build it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
part of
there,
the
and sewer
MRA.
doesn't run all the way through that area.
No.
That was a recommendation.
I just can't believe, I didn't know they were on that big of a septic system.
And there is some sewer, off behind there, I don't know, maybe they have something that they've tied in, but, it's not available in all areas of their.
there's
I'm not sure.
So-
of us in a row that
It's on a septic or a sewer.
She was like a bobblehead.
That's what he's asking about. I don't know, but I do know that there is a sewer, line that does run back in the back areas where the Sandia and stuff is, cause people have called about it, so I've heard about it back there. I don't know where it goes.
So that land that was just bought up there, that's just, south of Swiss Chalet, up there on that ridge. That was just bought, and they're gonna be building,
The one that, like if you're coming down into town on this side? Okay.
yeah, and they're talking about putting a restaurant and all that, so how are they getting served?
Yeah, we,
That's in the village or not in the
Yeah,
village?
that's in the village.
That's in the village.
Yeah, that was already part of us.
Okay, so I don't think we've really accomplished a whole lot today so far. I'm so confused.
We did get you a vote.
Did we?
I'm not sure.
Only if.
I'd say that's moving in the right direction.
So, do we have an answer, direction that we're looking at on this annexation? Because we have real things in front of us,
Yes.
like with Fawn Ridge, and then some other things that we're talking about, maybe, or would like to do, or whatever, in some planning, but, so you do have to provide, or you don't have to provide?
I think we should bring back some information related to this to have a discussion.
Because I don't want to get into a Rio Rancho deal where those
Yeah.
people have got to have a big lawsuit against whoever, Bernalino or whoever said yes.
Rio Rancho.
Rio Rancho said yes,
Yeah, and it was in Bernalillo County, but they annexed it.
and they didn't have the ability to service them. We'll have to give old Greg a spanking
There was
on
a
that one.
lawsuit, they just haven't developed. Well, and part of it is the burden becomes on the property owner to provide those services, and so they couldn't do it either.
Yeah, currently this is how our code reads.
Yeah, this is what's existing.
Hmm,
And there usually is an annexation agreement,
Yes.
that you can stipulate each case by case.
which is what this is saying. This is what needs to be in that agreement.
And I think it's just a reflection that the services, if needed, could be provided. But that it's on the applicants, it's their responsibility to build an infrastructure.
Correct, correct.
Mayor, I did,
That was just my question on annexation.
I did text Adam, and he said Swiss Chalet is on sewer. There's only some sewer on Olympia behind Swiss, and they've tied into that area there, so very limited in that area.
But if somebody came in and annexed something else in that area, you would say, yes, we can serve it, and you would have to provide the infrastructure.
Well, they would build all the infrastructure to tie in, but then we'd have to make sure we could supply water and actually treat the sewer.
Right, and you want to do that before you annex them, don't you?
Yes, well, that's why we need
That's what
to
you would
understand what our capacity is before we accept any annexation.
So we would keep this.
On the question of,
See, that's where I'm stuck. It sounds like yes, but then does that,
I think there's other requirements. If it mirrors the state requirement, I think we're fine. I would just wanna have some double check. the requirement.
but there's no, with us being the applicant, we would be all self-imposed. So it would still be handled correctly. Because it may not, it's not for housing, it may be for other issues. You know,
Well, and then you have a whole host of other agreements to create a public improvement district or whatever it is they're asking for.
That's where the infrastructure would come into play.
And then you've an agreement that that's how it's going to be provided.
for example, Gavilan Canyon where TL George's getting ready to put all those houses, nobody knows anything about, he didn't have any water rights over there. according to the OSE. And so where's he gonna get his water?
Is he
We tried
tying
to
into
talk
the,
to the village and we couldn't support it.
Yeah, and that's the point. We have not even been contacted. I mean, we've had people inquire as to how he's gonna build those houses up there. Where's he getting his water? You can have I don't know about a mutual domestic, because there's lawsuits up Cedar Creek on some of those, on one of those, that old, what was his name?
is he doing a subdivision?
He's
Doing something. He's up there clearing it off and gonna set some houses. But, you know, where are they getting their water? Where's the sewer could be?
hasn't been fully disclosed.
And the county knows nothing about it.
And I know the gentleman came in because he was having something with the county. He came in, talked, with the planning director at the time and, Adam, and they were trying to see if there was anything, cause he wanted to petition to be annexed, but we couldn't service the area and an intent of development. And then I've never heard anything.
'Cause these are real life things that are happening that I don't know that we're prepared for.
And does he have an existing subdivision? Is that how he's doing it?
He's bought the land
We bought the land.
in the county.
Where the mistake that we did back, I was on the council, is that we eliminated the ETZ.
Yeah.
That was the mistake we did on all that stuff that's going out there.
Well, you still have it for planning and platting, right?
No,
No?
Just inspections.
not for that
just-
property.
Just
Yeah.
inspections.
We only have the MOU that covers that area for building.
And that ETZ zone was there was a lot of discussion on that. Ooh. It was all about revenue and expenses. And
Yeah, that was Doth's pushing, I believe.
Who?
Doth. I think he was the one pushing to get rid of that.
Possibly, because he was on the county commission then.
Yeah, and he was on county commission. Cause
Okay.
we went round and round on
So,
that.
Michael, so far what we have is a list of stuff that y'all are gonna have to get back information to. So what are we looking at on the annexation?
We'll have someone review the language just to verify, but if it's fine, we'll let you know it should stay as is. If not, we'll bring back the language that's.
That'll work.
Mayor, I kind of get the sense from reading this that this whole ordinance on annexation is a solution looking for a problem, because the very first sentence refers to an annexation, any annexation shall be in accord with the annexation statement of policy 85-2 adopted by the village council on October 29, 1985. So apparently there was a big discussion in 1985 about what and how to annex things that, I mean, I've never even heard of that statement policy, much less read it. I don't know if Michael has or anybody else, but I just get the sense that in 1985, something was going down. There was a big debate.
We need to review the minutes. A lot of things happened in 85.
And it was
Well, that's when
the,
the ordinance was adopted.
was that, I mean, when you go to adopt ordinances, you have to give notice that there's gonna be a public hearing, have a public hearing, and then wait a certain amount of time. This just refers to some public policy statement that probably didn't get a public hearing. This may not even be valid, and I don't even know what it means. And the state statute provides a really good path for annexation and the rules for doing it. So I think I'll have a,
We need to snuggle back up to that if that's the case. But I'd like to see if there's any way to find out anything from 1985. But, you know, that we have pockets within the village
That are still
that
county.
They're still county that need to be annexed if it was not for the infrastructure.
Cedar
Right,
Creek.
Cedar Creek, well, you got right up here off of Wingfield.
Yeah, Hart Drive.
Yeah, right here in town.
Carrizo Canyon.
Rizzo Canyon, parts of,
Hart, that hill. where
that
the
little
lookout
section there,
tower is
that's,
at,
that's all county.
Oh, my
And also
gosh.
checkerboard's real bad right behind Circle J Barbecue.
Yes.
Yeah, up in there.
And so that's where this infill comes in, that we're talking about eventually on build out and reclamation. But if we could, I don't know, is there anything on 1985?
Well, I have all of the minutes, and these are fish.
Well, let's see if we can't get some of those.
Well, or we could just
Now, just see if I can find anything from 85.
Oh, you're already on it?
ignore the policy and rewrite it per the state statute.
I think that would be the quickest deal.
The only thing I could think of is.
Use the
is
statute.
When the grindstone development started there in the early eighties.
Yeah.
And for the
Okay,
dam.
found it.
You're probably right, right
That
there.
was the,
It
That was in the
early
county.
80s, yep.
that when those projects started,
You,
so.
you may be right.
Okay. I found the minutes. I'm gonna just have to go through them and see what it says.
But I like the idea of just going with so we'll have to have a public hearing to change the ordinance to go back and adopt state statute?
No, we'll just,
it
change the
altogether.
language here. The
Yeah.
whole thing
Yeah.
has to go through a public hearing.
Yeah.
Because
This is why. we're
Zach,
not
I'm gonna
doing
send
this
you
on
that to look at
public
it
hearing.
too.
yeah, can we throw in the wild horses into this conversation too?
Last time I came down here, I almost got run over by a wild horse, and I caught Stephanie in a
I
panic.
think we should. Why not?
Let's just make it so complicated. But, but I like the idea of just following state statute if it's clear.
And then we might have to rescind a policy.
Yes. And whatever this statement is.
You could just, as part of the public hearing on the whole 54, just show it's stricken.
Yeah.
So just strike the whole annexation ordinance, if
And
that's
then-
what you guys want to do.
And then put it in.
You don't even have to put it in.
Oh, you just-
It just state statute controls.
Oh, okay.
Frank Potter was the deputy manager at the time, so
No,
we'll have to pick his brain.
We wouldn't.
and he'll probably remember it.
He will.
Strike.
That's what the weather was like that day.
I know, I don't.
But I think at 80s, that you were right in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember them building the dam.
And I can remember when I first got on council, that was a big fuss about the development over there.
Yep.
Smells like we're having french fries.
Is that what it was?
Okay, so we'll look at that. Vacation, we didn't change. Do you have any thoughts about vacation? Should it change?
You guys have had a couple vacations of right of ways here lately.
And those were handled pretty
Yeah,
simply and easily.
processed pretty good.
What page are we on now?
128.
So I'm looking at this now, and the enforcement procedures were deleted.
Yep. All the enforcement.
I think that's because
'Cause it
it
was
just
moved.
moved. It's not
Yeah.
really a deletion, it was moved
Moved.
to other applicable sections of the code.
Oh, okay.
So it just doesn't hold itself here.
I think it's moved up under administration. Well, let me just say, on the development standards, everything that follows this, is pretty much separate ordinances that had been adopted. And
What
we
is it?
did not change most of those. We have some language changes that are at the request of staff. So it should be pretty quick to go through. What time is it?
The food just got here, so can we just eat it while it's optimal instead of waiting for
Yeah.
the fries to get cold and everything? And then I want to have it on this terrain management.
Okay.
Because, you know, we talk about 2-story, 3-story, but, you know, we look at, it's not lot, block, and square here, and so, but anyway, if we can have a recess for lunch. Thank you. Maybe I'll get smarter. All this fog. Some of this is just.
I still think that's gonna be, it looks smaller, as it all to me at the meeting the other night, still thought it was, just giving me the parapet wall and all that.
How are you?
All right, how you doing? Yeah, I know, but just to be. Did you wanna talk to me about the other stuff real quick? We can a little bit, it's just. Okay, okay. It's a little bit, she told me it's a little different what she said now than last night. Well, cause I had a conversation and they were like, no, it was a little different what she said.
They just kind of.
You guys get you a burger or a chicken sandwich. You might get in there quick before the burgers are gone. Thank you.